Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining me again on another day of lives. I am glad to be here. It is hot outside, and I'm currently sitting in air conditioning, which is wonderful. I have a very amazing guest on today. Her name is Justine, and she is coming to talk about all things that have to do with life as well as time and fall. Okay, life as well as all things intellectual. Because one thing I've noticed about her is she's a very well thought out human being. So, with that being said, when she logs on here, I will be more than happy to let her in. I hope everybody's having a wonderful Wednesday. I didn't know what day it was. I had to actually look at that because it's been such a long week, I guess you could say. So, that being the case, we're just going to wait for a second here and wait for her to pop on. I'm going to just light up my pipe here. And we'll get her on here in a second. I see that she is there. I'm waiting for her to join. Join, my friend. Join. All right. There she is. There you are.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm so glad to see you live on video. And I contemplated showing up in a sketch character costume, but I just returned from working with a school, so I'm shifting gears.
That would have been amazing. I think you should have done that. Yeah.
Maybe next time, if there's a next time.
Yeah.
I know I probably seem like I'm a flake. I'm all over the place, but
quite the contrary.
okay.
You're all good. You're all good. How are you today? You said you're at school?
I was at a school. I just returned to my apartment, but I live outside of the city of Chicago, but I was with one of my partner schools there since 7:30 this morning. So we got a lot of great things done because, teachers just closed out their year here. I know it depends on where you're at in the country, but so it was great to just connect. I always love connecting with teachers face to face in person.
So what did you do there? You said sketching, or what were you doing at school?
Oh, at the school I work with. So I have a consulting firm called Educator Aid, and they were kicking off. We have a process. We have multiple processes, but we have a process called Culture Pulse, and it really just gauges how people feel, what are their opinions. It's introspective on the school year, and then their leadership team is going to dive into that real-time data tomorrow. So it's also anonymous in a way for people to really say what they mean, and also get that information back to their leaders and say, I like this, I need this to change. Imagine that, trying to listen to people's voices before just making decisions.
I don't know. I don't know if that's good or not.
Wild. But I'm just so glad to actually see you. I know you hop on my sister's live sometimes, and I have to give you compliments again because I love your pipe, your signature pipe.
Oh, thank you. Yes, this is my early Happy Father's Day pipe that my wife got me. So it is
a what?
A Dracula pipe. It's a bulldog shape, but it's got a Dracula stem.
Fancy.
Yeah.
Well, I see your collection too in the background.
That's part of them. Yeah.
Okay.
I have the other collection downstairs. But I've been smoking a pipe for 24 years. So, it's just what I do.
My dad used to smoke pipes sometimes when we were growing up. I love the smell.
See, that's key. See, my wife loves the smell as well, and it doesn't stick in the house.
Yeah.
Compared to a cigar or anything like that.
Yep.
And what people don't understand is you don't actually inhale the pipe. You just puff the pipe. Mm-hmm. And it makes you look smarter than you actually are.
Oh, so it's a prop, if you will, as well.
There you go.
A meaningful prop.
And if anybody ever asks you something, you can just put it in your mouth and kind of like you're actually thinking about what you're going to say,
Yeah.
and deciding if you want to be mean, what you have to say, or nice, or make up something, But they immediately think, oh, this guy knows more than I realize because I have a pipe, right? He obviously knows stuff.
I mean, yeah, it does definitely, for me, it's a calming effect. I
Yes.
think it also makes it comfortable. Like, okay, this person's comfortable with who they are, and they're just being who they always are in the
Wait,
comfort of their home.
you are totally correct because you don't see a lot of people with pipes these days, right? and
I mean, maybe certain forms of pipes in
oh
states
yeah,
where cannabis is legal.
that
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 could be.
my I have another IG live next week with Mira, and we are discussing how tobacco has played an important part in spirituality.
Mm-hmm.
And so we will be doing an IG live on that next week, and you can be
Okay.
sure I'll be puffing my pipe as
Mm-hmm.
we discuss tobacco and all things spiritual. So it'll be fun.
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of interest. That is one of my passions. I think I probably tend to be a hobbyist. That's why I was like, oh, a collection of pipes.
Yeah.
But that is something I get very into right now, is learning more about plant medicines.
Oh,
Um, just because of also having indigenous roots and stuff, I'm like, I've always been drawn to that. My first jobs were working outside and landscaping. So I've just always loved plants and flowers since I was a kid. So
I
I'm
want.
always fascinated by how Mother Nature can support us and not big pharma.
Oh, that. It's funny because I was interviewing a witch on here, some
Okay.
right, nice lady, but she called me a pipe witch or a plant witch because of nature, because of the tobacco, because of all that, right? So just go along that. Okay, before we jump too far into things, let me go ahead and back up here. For those that are going to watch or are watching our IG live, just take a moment and introduce yourself. Tell people that I associate who you are.
Who am I? What
Yeah,
a loaded, Brad, what a loaded question. No.
how I roll. How I roll.
So, so I'll start with personal, because I've often worked in K-12 spaces my whole career. Well, often my whole career has been in K-12. And often in those spaces in particular, people are like, oh, what's your title? What are your degrees? And it's very professional. So I'll
Right.
start with some personal, but Justine Gonzalez. I was born and raised in the Midwest. My mother, rest in peace, was Amish Mennonite background and father Puerto Rican. I know that you were on live with my sister last week,
Yeah,
so
who am
I
I?
think if you put us side by side, though, our lives are probably going to be completely different. But I didn't know what she brought up or what she didn't, but and that's me being completely bluntly honest. I haven't watched the whole thing yet,
Thanks
so
for that. Thanks for your support.
yeah. So, I mean, I liked it. I
Oh,
just haven't
all right.
watched the whole
Yeah.
thing yet. But so yeah, so interesting upbringing for sure as a third culture kid and giving it a name to something. So if you grew up in often that I'm a nerd. I'm a self-professed nerd. But if you that term originated in the 50s for expats whose kids were actually being raised overseas in another culture. So they
Oh,
had this kind of duality of almost like, yes, you can be adaptive everywhere, but then almost feeling like you don't really have a home in some ways. And then that phenomenon, of course, especially in countries in the US where we are more so in some ways a melting pot over the years, it's becoming more and more common, obviously, that there's people like me, because you have immigration and then, second, third, fourth generations and all the mix of my ancestry DNA is like Heinz 57. So that's an interesting key point, and people are always just shocked. And one of the nicknames one of my friends gave me in college was Amo Rican. So that's always the running joke for me and my siblings is I've only ever met in my entire life, I've met one other person, and he had parents, his mother was Puerto Rican and father had been Mennonite.
Wow.
I've only met
Why even
one other person who had that exact like cultural origin, I guess.
how did they even find each other?
So my parents were set up. They went to opposing high schools. My dad was born in Chicago because my grandfather came from Puerto Rico when he was 16, didn't know English, came to Chicago, one of 27 kids. Yeah, that's the whole.
What?
Okay,
What?
again, so I'm the culture person for sure. Like that's my thing is culture. So I don't know how many details Kara gave because we are very different. A lot of times people conflate us like you're the same, but I'm like, no, we talk differently for sure.
Yeah.
And but I've always been that way. I've been fascinated by it. I'll sit with grandparents, ask all the questions, look at all the historical stuff, and she does too. But then obviously I like that's been in my school work and doing a lot of turnaround work too. So anyways, interesting nuance that I think always intrigues people because those worlds are so very different. But then you also don't realize, I think, until you're grown up or, well, I'm always going to be trying to become an adult. I don't think you realize till you look back like, oh wait, so people weren't like not all my classmates were going to an Amish person's house with 400 people you're related to for a reunion, and then over here you're like in somebody's basement with all your Puerto Rican relatives, and like you don't really look like any of them anywhere you go. So it is a very interesting concept, and also truly like I'm in a PhD program, and that's my body of research is about cultural neuroscience and cultural psychology, which are newer emerging concepts.
Which, I was looking at your information like, man, she's got a lot of letters after her name.
So I have my own dissonance with that too, right? Because as a third culture kid, I think for me, I always felt like, man, it literally and figuratively, what boxes am I supposed to check on this test? What boxes am I supposed to check on this ethnicity for, right? On all the stuff we fill out for our government and stuff. Yeah. And when you grow up that way and you start to, for me, it was being able to connect pretty young with the story of Jesus through the church. I have much to say about that and deconstruction journey too, but I think because I had that, and that's one teaching that both of my parents instilled in us, I really latched onto, but I'm always at home with Christ and with who I am and who God made me to be. So I don't have to fit in with anybody or what somebody thinks about me. So that was something that, even though, that's a struggle at times, but I do think that once, if all of us, regardless of your cultural story, regardless of how you look, how you speak, whatever, if any of us as humans would even just devote like 5 minutes extra a day to just focus on ourselves and know more about ourselves, we could really care more about other people.
Well, okay. So I'm going to stop right there for a second. Check.
Keep me on track.
Your sister said just nice things about you, okay? Never said anything mean about you on our live.
Right. No, I'm just
right. So you don't know if I'm telling the truth or not. So none that I can remember. I'm older. I lose memories. These things happen. So
COVID brain.
Yeah, you know what?
I recently had a terrible case of COVID.
Oh.
I'm fully vaccinated. It was the first time, and I've had a lot of other colleagues too that have said the same. There was a spike, I feel like, in April and May.
Yeah. Well, I just want to go back a second here and just you nodded all too joyfully when I say I was older and had memory loss. I was a little worried about that. So
that's why I was nodding, because I'm experiencing COVID brain legitimately at times right now, and I'm like, I literally can't remember that.
Yeah, I blame everything on COVID, right? Or my teenage daughter. It all, it just kind of goes the same, right? So let me ask you. You mentioned deconstructing. Obviously, you grew up in many different religious circles, or have it. What? Tell me about your deconstruction story. What? How did that play out? How did that roll?
Oh Lordy. Oh, that's a great question. So just as far as context, not only having like massive extended family, some of who I will tell a quick story because I love to tell cultural stories or just little nuances about because I'll get to what your question is. I went to an undergrad. Me and my siblings are all first gen college grads, and I went to an undergrad in Indiana that was affiliated with the Wesleyan Church. So it was a private Christian university. I actually didn't even know what Wesleyan was. I grew up 2 hours from there, but I didn't even know what Wesleyan was. I grew up mainly in a Baptist church, and then a couple different Baptist churches. We kind of church hopped as a family, and then majority of teenage years in evangelical, specifically. So got interested, knew from young age I wanted to be a teacher, and of course, I know I'm paying for this degree and going for scholarships and stuff. What does Justine do? I'm researching what are the best, most rigorous programs. So I actually did not even choose that university based on the fact it was Christian. I chose it because they had one of the best renowned teaching programs in the state, and they required you to do more experiential. And I know I'm a hands-on learner. So that is how I selected it. And that also informed a lot, because that went into a lot more legalism. But the story with that is to the point of having a lot of multitude of family that I've never even met. I actually there was only about 4,000 or 5,000 students at that campus. I met a second cousin that I was friends with for a year before I even knew this, then saw her at an Amish family reunion. Second cousin from my mom's side at that college, and a second cousin from my dad's side. But anyways, so and that's a whole other story too, because it's strange how you find. I love to just talk with people and get to know them. I'm always curious and genuinely. And we were at a mixer. This was starting my freshman year, and Josh comes up to me and he's like, "Hey, what's up?" And he's like, "I'm from Virginia." I was kind of almost getting a vibe like, "Oh, you think I'm cute?" And I thought he was good looking too.
That's important.
Did we really look at each other and think, "Oh, we could be related"? In hindsight, we could have. No, but then I go, so again, being me, even at 18, I go, "Oh, where are you from?" He says, "Virginia." And I said, "Well, I'm from Elkhart, Indiana. You probably don't know where that is." And he goes, "No, actually I do. My grandma lives there." And it's like 80 to 100,000 people in the town, and randomly, right? I'm just trying to keep conversation going. "Oh, what's your grandma's name?" And he said, "Beulah." And I said, "Beulah, what's her last name?" And he tells me Gonzalez. And I go, "What?" I said, "I'm pretty sure that's one of my aunties." So we realized we were related. Anyways, I'm saying all that to say that was a very interesting experience, even though having multiple families. The cousin on my mom's side was conservative Mennonite. We're covering the whole time I knew her, still does. And so even just being exposed to that, I knew there's a whole lot of belief systems, a whole lot of theology. I was always fascinated with even researching that in high school. There was specifically a lot of Mormons that went to my high school. I've just always loved culture, studying people and humanity. Let
me just ask something here, okay? It sounds like you have been one of those people that questions and research everything since you were birthed into this world. Is that correct?
Books were my ticket to see the world. We did not always have time. We always had enough. There wasn't always a lot of extra money and stuff. And so my mom, she would take us to all the branches of the public libraries in the summer. That was our fun. And that was also something I'm always very grateful for too, is and maybe it's questionable that she just didn't have time to review what we were reading, but she really did not have a lot of parameters on what we read, which is very adverse to how strict a lot of the other rules were, especially just you're not even supposed to like dance and all this stuff. But I'm very, very grateful for that, because I loved reading, and books were my escape to see the world and to experience other people and other time periods. And I was obsessed. Even looking around now, like that's what always moves with me anytime I've moved is my books. It's like my comfort blanket. It's really heavy. It's a really heavy comfort blanket when you move, but but anyways, to answer your question, a lot of that I think began for me when I met somebody when I was 22. I was set up on a blind date, had just been in my first classroom position in Indianapolis as a teacher. and we were engaged. His father was actually a bishop in the Anglican church. There was a lot of things that I learned about myself in that relationship. Was not a good relationship or healthy. I ended up calling off my wedding 3 days before it.
Oh
And
my.
so, yeah. So I was met for the first time as an adult at 23 going through this. I had been through some other traumas that occurred in my first year of teaching. I lost one of my students, like she was murdered, and there
Oh
was just a lot
yeah.
happened. And I was in a desperation after that. I literally Googled churches in Indianapolis, and I went to the first one that came up. That was actually, they're now affiliated with Vineyard, which I don't know much about, but
Yeah.
it was I know enough about it. But at the time, for me, that was the first experience I had where when I look back, I think I was actually kind of valued for who I was. In my upbringing as a kid, teenager especially, I mean, it was beaten into your head. Your worthiness is for your husband and your virginity. And we had at one of the retreats, I had a husband box where we wrote our future husband letters and how we're saving ourselves for them. So there was a lot of restriction, and especially I think for women, when you grow up in that, and I've talked to many women who are mid-30s millennials like myself, who when you grow up in that, it really hands over your sense of agency for yourself,
Yeah.
and the way how you view your self-worth, and the power that God has actually entrusted you with, and it minimizes you. So going into that experience, and then again, more of an evangelical setting, but those were some of my first settings too, where I felt freedom to actually finally kind of step into my own faith and start to go, wait, this isn't required. Like in college, you had to go to chapel, and just to examine those things. And I also knew there was such adverse. The interesting part about my deconstructing journey is I don't know that I don't think I've ever felt mad, like explicitly mad at God. And I know that's different for everybody. And I don't even at times feel explicitly mad at the church. And me and my sister talk about this a lot. I had different experiences than her too. And I still cherish many of those people. But I knew and had so many experiences already in the K-12 space of how people talked about children and talked to children that also claimed Christ, that I at least knew outside of legalism in my growing up period. There's a lot that can get lost in translation of what it means to follow Christ, or any type of doctrine or religion somebody chooses, I suppose, which to me, following teaching is and owning it for your own is very different than following a religion. But
Okay, so that leads me to this question.
okay.
All right.
You ask anything. I'm an open book,
I
Brad.
know that's so am I. So am I really. Okay, so knowing that, I don't want to put a label on you, but what are your beliefs these days? What do you believe? Coming through the vast different cultures and teachings and religion and everything, where do you fall?
So I believe adamantly, and for me, my access point of knowing God more or trying to understand God more, I think that's a lifelong thing. I don't think there's these ending points of like, you're wrong. But for me, that was Christ. Christ was how I met and understood God more. I think I also had I am very intuitive, but I also have some very, again, you don't realize when you're little, but like I've audibly had experiences where I hear, whatever you want to call it, the Holy Spirit is what I've always called it. But I don't know. So I still definitely pick apart the Bible. I study a lot of other holy texts, but I would say my beliefs surround around, am I loving myself? Am I loving others as I choose to love myself? And am I loving myself the way that God loves me? Because if I'm made in God's image and then I'm not caring for me, I'm essentially telling God, well, like, you didn't do a good enough job.
Right.
And so I think for me, that sounds so simplistic, but that's what I've always gone back to. And then very much, I mean, my first name, I believe in the meaning of your name that you're given, and trying to attempt to become that and live up to that in your lifetime. And my first name means full of justice. And so just even looking at how Jesus challenged people, what I don't pray to Jesus, I pray to God. So I know that also becomes very contentious in different religious circles, specifically in Christianity. So that's always fascinating to me, but I've kind of resolved that no matter where you find yourself, no matter whose teachings you do follow, if we learn how to love ourselves, if we learn how to understand ourselves, and then we do that with others, I think that's honoring God.
Okay, now let's define something here, okay? Because
Okay.
kind of digging in here a little bit. So,
Please do.
God, who is God? Is it the God of the Bible? Was it other religious God? I mean, like, how do you personally define God?
God, source, universe are the same to me as far as an entity or higher power. I really don't. I know many people are caught up on still calling God Father. I just don't think. I just think God is so big beyond our minds that it extends beyond human constructs, whether they're socio-political, like race, or ethnic or gender. And I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. Do
Oh,
any of us know? I want to hear. See, I know you'll be like, well, this life isn't about me. But but I do. I'm curious because of your background too.
the great Southern Baptist Brethren background. Oh, yeah.
Those Southern Baptists.
I find that the older I get, the more I don't know.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, just so much I don't know. We've got Goddess is saying so much, sending
Aww.
positive vibes to both of you.
Good to see you on here. Back to you, love.
Yeah, she's amazing. Okay, so wow, you wrote thank you in there. How quickly?
Well, yeah.
That was impressive. I can't multitask that.
Wait, so I will tell you the truth too, because when I started really unpacking versions of the Bible in particular, and I've studied the Quran, Lao Tzu's word, the Torah, which I think many of us who are seekers, that we do want to look into those things. We want to question, what have other people experienced? What do they say about this? But studying, I grabbed the wrong book. Studying the Apocrypha.
Oh, look at you diving in the Apocrypha.
Which I know, once again, controversial. But I think just understanding the origin too of how things formulated even from the Holy Roman Empire, how the scrolls from Ethiopia were adopted, and all the everything that gets lost in translation, right? So I say that to say, I think we still have to be adamant, regardless of your beliefs, even if you don't believe in God. We have to examine and ask ourselves, why do I believe what I believe? And is it harming myself or others in some way? Because I don't think whatever God is as an entity, I don't think God, that I felt very clearly in my soul for myself anyways, God does not intend for us to be harmful or oppressive to ourselves or others.
Right. And to answer your question, I love the fact that you've read the Apocrypha and studied all of those because.
I haven't read all of it, Brad.
Well, I mean, you.
Let's be real.
Well, some of you are like, oh my God. But like the Book of Enoch, for instance, is such a incredible source that the Jewish people pulled from the Old Testament and the New Testament, right? And so one of the things in which I did during my time of figuring this out, because I was just born and raised one way. And so when I started deconstructing, I started reading all those things I was never allowed to read.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Right? Even in college, they describe them as, these are the white hats, these are the black hats, right? These are the ones you read. These are not the ones you read, right? And you're like,
So
oh,
many connotations there, but
right,
okay.
exactly, right, exactly, right. Good guys, bad guys, right? But it's amazing. I dove a lot into how the scriptures were put together, the scriptures, what words were added, what were taken, what was written in the margins, the change, all of those kinds of things, the pieces, when they were written, how inconsistent, just all that stuff. And I came away looking like there's no way, in my personal opinion, that the Bible portrays all that there is to know about God, right? Or that it's inerrant or infallible, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then so I started looking, hey, if I was born in Africa or in China, I would be worshiping or not worshiping a different way, right? Just matter where you're born and where you're at, right? And so I was like, okay, well, what do they believe? Because one thing that's consistent, I think you can agree with, is throughout all of time, humanity has been looking like, what is out there?
Yeah.
Is there more?
Yep.
And they all have a different way of experiencing that more, and they've written that down.
Yep. Yep.
But none of them can agree on the more, right?
Well, except the only thing I will offer, except when it's not written, right? And so many traditions that are indigenous,
Oral.
whether it's tribes in different African countries, whether it's part of my lineage was as Taino and the peoples of the Dominican and Puerto Rico, indigenous Americans, right? Like, regardless, in those traditions, and especially in more high context cultures, it's orally passed down.
And same
And
with
so you're yes, exactly. I see. Yes. Goddess of
God.
Tetris. Oh, I love your handle. Goddess
Did
of
you not
Tetris.
follow her? Oh my God.
I
You
gotta follow
follow her.
you. I will.
She's
But
awesome.
she said, yeah, great point, Brad, where you're born. Exactly. But that was also part of my journey, right? Because I always chose, so I moved every year of my adult life until I was 32 from 21 because I wanted to live in every community I worked in. And so one thing I will tell you too is that even like that was a huge part of it. The fact that I was also engaged to somebody from another country whose father was a bishop in a totally different like there's a lot of pieces there that have always still kept me engaged in questioning, even when I've been more heavily involved in like the institution of church in the West here. But I've also had many other spiritual experiences traveling to other places and getting the privilege to be able to do that as an adult. And I also, the thing I would add is I started wondering, right? And I think maybe, I don't know, maybe not everybody has these thoughts, but I started wondering a lot. Okay, what about my Taino ancestors? What about those who I know that I also have African bloodlines? Like, what about all of these ancestors that are also part of me, or the mystics who were part of my Irish blood background, right? Like,
Yeah.
what about all of that? And you're telling me that because they happen to be born before Christ existed or before Buddha, or they're not in this region, that somehow they're going to be damned to hell?
Mm-hmm.
I just don't believe that.
Well, and that brings up a whole nother issue with
I know.
God being good or not, right? Or loving.
And what's good?
Yeah, what is good,
According to who?
and does he even care, or she, or whoever, universe, whoever it may be, do they even care, right? I mean, there's all kinds of little nuances in that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let me ask you. You went through this deconstruction phase. You've come out with these thoughts and these beliefs and everything like that. What advice would you give to somebody who?
Oh, hi, Nestle. I think you're Nate's twin. I think my bad. I know who that is. Okay. Hi.
Squirrel.
Sorry.
That's okay.
IG lives are not good for people with ADD.
That's awesome. What advice would you give to someone that is deconstructing? What would you give them any direction?
What? I don't know that I'm qualified to give advice because it's an ongoing thing.
It totally
I know nothing, Brad. And I'm okay with it. No. I think you have to be willing to stop creating measurements that are based on comparing yourself to others. That's a really, really big one for any type of awareness. So even if somebody says, well, I want to get into doing my part with anti-racism. I want to, just so you all know, if you join, my company does equity cultural training work with schools, nonprofits, etc. So I often hear that sentiment. I want to do more. I want to support people, and specifically more from white or white passing people. And that's okay, right? There's intention there, and that's genuine and that's valid. But it's like with any journey, if you say you want to grow in something, doggone it, you better be ready to put the mirror on you, because it's not a competition. It's not an oppression Olympics. It's not a success Olympics. It's not a privilege Olympics. When you keep setting these bars, all then we're doing is replicating potentially in whatever unique upbringings and contexts we did have. And we're not then actually we're not evolving. We're not evolving then based on self and our connection to what we deem as divine or holy. And I just think we miss a lot when we're so consumed. And unfortunately, in my experiences, specifically in Baptist church, it is all about keeping up legalistic appearances. And are you doing enough? And well, I'm dying inside, or my family's in hell, but we're gonna put on a face in our Sunday best. And Fred's like, don't stop. But that, and then everything gets hidden, and then everything's cloaked in guilt and shame. So when you're not honest even with yourself, like, forget it. And then you're just going to keep digging that same guilt and shame spiral. And to me, when you look into even just understanding the vibrations of people's energy, all those pieces and elements of the human experience, the love is literally the opposite vibrational experience of experiencing guilt and shame. It's polar opposites. And so
Yeah, I think it's interesting because you point out something there. One of the main struggles a lot of my clients have, right, are that they have trouble trusting themselves when they come out of religion.
Yep.
They have trouble putting value on themselves.
Yep.
And it's because of everything we're taught. Die to self.
I must decrease.
Yes.
He must increase.
Oh, and my feelings are bad and my thoughts are bad. Only those are from God. They're good.
I release them to God. No. Shit. I pushed down the trauma and didn't deal with it for years.
Yes, that's exactly right.
Layer after layer.
There's so much trauma. Yes. Yeah, that's why I went to counseling for as long as I did, right? And I still go every now and then, just as a checkup, right? So, I totally hear that, and really, it's a challenge for them to change that rewiring or rewire that which has been impressed upon their brain since they were a kid. I mean, they were taking kids and telling them from the young, by the way, you caused this person to die, and by the way, there's nothing good in you except what comes from Jesus. And by the way, you don't want to go to hell and be separated from your parents. Doing.
For me, especially zoning on like my nerding out with intercultural communications. That's some of my letters. I know I have the certification in the process communication model, which was built on therapy. By the age of 7, our personality structures are defined. And so I know, even based on my unique structure, it was inevitable because my base personality is driven by beliefs, Brad. I'm going to latch onto it because I'm going to drink the Kool-Aid. So one of the other realities, especially in working with people who, whether it's your line where you're talking more specifically about deconstructing and the life coaching part of that, or even in my trainings too, with cultural awareness and stuff, it is such a challenge, especially when we are not acknowledging there's so much that stays put in the subconscious. And if we don't bring it to what's conscious then we can't become aware of it. And then we definitely can't even learn to accept it. And so therefore we stay stagnant. And that was Carl Rogers, a great psychologist, who said, when I accept who I am, then I can change. And a lot of us don't even ever know how to make our subconscious more real. Right now, one of my modalities for therapy is hypnotherapy. I just, this has been one of my 2022 personal growth things.
Right.
And I got a referral for you for another live, my hypnotherapist, because she's fascinating and amazingly gifted, but that is a lot of that work. And so I'm also convinced that if we took more effort for ourselves and like ownership, right? Of, oh, yeah, I don't like the way I'm thinking about that. I should figure that out. But I'm finding more and more, right? Like people aren't slowing down to do that.
Yeah, I think one of the things that COVID did was made some people slow down.
Forced, yeah.
Yeah, right. And people don't like that. I mean, because then they really have to look at who they are, right? And think about maybe some of those trauma or those things that come up that they've been pushing down. But it is hard work. I mean, it is hard work, and it's emotional hard work.
Yes.
Because, and that's why I think all but one of my clients so far is in therapy as well as my client. Because there's deep-seated issues that I'm not trained to handle.
Right, yeah.
Nor do I want to. Right?
I was stretching out my legs. That's the truth.
Well, is that what you're doing?
Knock the whole tripod over.
Oh, you have a tripod, huh?
I have a tripod to hold my phone. I do. Yeah. Okay. So what else? What else, Brad? I mean, but that would be my number one, is like always with awareness work, you have to make time for it. So even if it's just 5 minutes, maybe you start out, you journal for 5 minutes, or you're willing to sit for 5 minutes. I do these exercises too. I just did with a school group this morning. Over 50% of that room, there was 30 people in there. Over 50% of them, they couldn't even do the exercise, which I expect all different types, right?
All right.
I had 3 structured questions. We call it Quiet 5. They could not sit and respond. Over 50% of the room on laptops, still on email. And I told her, I mean, I'm not coming in there with a hammer like, you have to turn off tech, or I just said, hey, however you want to ponder, if you want to close your eyes, if you like to journal, if you want to type, whatever, but we will be quiet for 5 minutes while we consider these questions to frame our session. And I tell you, every time I do it, people tell me, that was way longer than 5. Oh no, actually I stopped at 4. No. So it's just,
I don't know.
And we have to remember that, right, too, when we step away from being inside the institutions, we have to not forget what that felt like.
Yeah.
Because we're in a different role now.
Yeah. Yeah, it's easy to forget that, or you want to forget some of it, right? So that makes sense. Okay, so let me ask you, you obviously have a lot going on. For my guess, you realize we've already been on for almost 45 minutes?
No. This is why I have too much going on, because I tell my sister this all the time. I'm like, if I can't be fully present and be fully in, I don't like to do it. Like, right. And then it does turn into, like, I lose track of even time sometimes.
Yeah. So
that's not a bad thing.
For everyone's going to watch this, as well as those are, how do people follow you? Do you have any, I mean, you have a podcast. We haven't even delving into that yet. I mean, you have a lot going on. Plug yourself. Tell us every way.
Okay. So yes, I'll plug a couple things. Educatoraid.com. There's an E on the end, like a help. Educatoraid.com. It's where you can find all things free resources, learning workshops, some core tools. I make sure that a lot of that is not only just for K-12, because I do work with other social impact focused businesses as well as nonprofits. So go to educatoraid.com. That is the best way to see all that we have to offer, including our podcast, which is called Cultural Capacity. And really it's focused on emotionally aware leadership and just understanding our own awareness levels. Every episode is around 15 minutes or less. And every episode is titled as a question. So you can pick and choose a la carte. Oh, this one speaks to me. I want to listen to that one. That's interesting. Cool. So That's another thing. I think the third thing I'll plug, I have some big things launching in the next few months, but if y'all follow me here at Spiritually Strategic on Instagram, you'll see all that stuff. But I do want to plug, so me and my sister, who was on I want to call it a show, on your live show last week, I think 2 weeks ago, she on Brad becomes like the Jerry Springer of Instagram. I'm throwing this pipe.
Oh. Going everywhere. Hand.
Yes. But I will plug one of our projects, which she's actually the producer and mastermind behind. So one of the things we've realized, because my company just turned 5 and she officially quit her nursing career. She's a creative director and was supporting me emotionally, spiritually, mentally many years before she joined officially with the Educator Aid vision. But I like to do things with people. If you haven't noticed, I'm a very collaborative person in a lot of ways. I definitely need my downtime, but I'm saying all that to say we lost our mother in January of this year, and grew up. That's a whole other story too, with lots of influence that was harmful, I know, to her from the church, but then her not knowing how to process that, having some mental health struggles. There was just a lot of confounding things. But one of our best ways to get through that, because we just had a lot of loss this past year, which I don't think makes us special. I think a lot of people have, like even more so than I guess what's normal. But we both just love really quirky humor, especially sketch comedy. And that is like our therapy. And it doesn't mean, I mean, you see our posts, like we love moon baths and meditation and studying. And yes, we take a lot of time to do that, and therapies and all that, right? Different modalities. But for us, we grew up, laying in front of one of those big silver boom boxes, one cassette tape, recording over and over. And so we just really have always been into that. We played dress up all the time growing up for hours and hours. And we found that to be quite therapeutic. But one of the things that we've realized too, after facilitating for years with communications work, executive coaching, cultural intelligence, all these different things, is because it is so difficult for people to face who they are, and also to name accurately what is often happening with cultural shifts and cultural norms, specifically in the United States, because that's our context right now. Right. Then we're like, well, how could we make it easier and more engaging through these different caricatures that we probably all know or have encountered to some degree, while also they're also characters who are making fun of ourselves too in certain ways.
I have page.
What?
I have been on that page.
Oh, Lord. So we're not, like, disclaimer, we are not professionals. We're not out here in Chicago, Second City. But it is our thing for sure. And I think she's landed on a very unique concept, which is really that idea of culture can be clickbait. And it's these different existing belief systems that often, when you have a very fiery approach, which I can tend to, and be very direct, because I feel like I'm going to call a spade a spade. Like, why are we covering this up? I grew up in all that. I'm not doing that shit anymore. But I also know for many, many people, that's very alarming and disarming, and maybe doesn't feel safe. So we started thinking, how can we also, while we have our fun with it, have a little intention, so that eventually when these characters kind of get into debates and stuff, people actually see a modeling of like how to do that. So I think I'm not giving away the whole concept, but we also both worked various mall jobs. And, if you're a even 70s, 80s, 90s baby, the characters you see at the mall, and they're endless. So including myself. Yeah. So that's kind of the whole premise, and it's called Let's Go to the Mall Live. You can look us up and follow us there. So that'll be the last thing I plug as far as creative stuff.
That's awesome. So let me just encourage anybody that if you don't follow Justine, you are missing out. You need to follow her.
You might mute me after 24 hours. That's okay. I told somebody my new motto is going to be, I'm like psychedelics. I'm best consumed in small doses. I'm kidding. But I also know I'm not for everybody. Just like all of us, like we
None
can't
of us,
expect.
right? I mean, it's okay. It's all right. I love it. And I love what you do, and I love your voice.
Thank
And
you.
when I love the fact you speak up. So we're gonna have to cut it off before they
Your
cut.
next one on the
So
live show.
actually, I had to postpone my next one
Oh,
because she got ill. So Mira and I are doing it next Wednesday. But I also think I've got some other ones in between then and now too.
you're
So,
rocking, man. I
so
love it. And
oh, yeah,
I love seeing you grow too. And I know you've just had so much influence through all the years. I'm excited to keep getting to know you.
well, I love this, and I love meeting people, and so it is a joy. I mean, it's a good month. Hopefully, at the very least, I'll have about 8 IG lives in this month alone, which would
You
be
should reach out to Guinness Book of World Records and be like, hey,
no.
what do I have to do? That could be your IG marketing thing. Like, I winner of holds the world record for most lives.
I got to tell you, I pale in comparison to the goddess of Tetris. That's on.
Okay, I'm
She,
gonna go follow her right away.
I got to tell you, she does so many lives. I do not know how she does it. She's professional with it. She does an amazing job with it. But literally, her month of lives blows everyone else away I've ever known. So,
Well, I mean, she's got a handle like that. She must be mastermind if she's the goddess of Tetris and has
she is
figured it out.
gaming on Tetris. She is. So, hey, thank you so much, Justine.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. We'll have to talk some more and some other topics because you have so much that we haven't talked about yet. And I can't wait to hear more. So,
Brad's like, and I have to cut you off because you talk so much.
oh, I love it. I absolutely love it. I mean, it's
Well,
been
I've had a blast. This was like the cherry on top of my day today.
so
So
good.
thank you. And thanks for attempting to keep me on track too. It's
Well,
happening.
you know what? Sometimes you just got to let the horse run, right?
Yeah.
I mean, no tethering it. Just go.
Thank you, sir.
Hey,
And may God bless you and have a wonderful Father's Day.
thank you very much.
Okay.
Have a wonderful day. I would say give your family my love, but your family doesn't know me. So, there's
I'll
that.
tell Thaddeus when I call Thaddeus back here. I'll say, "Hey, Brad says hi." We'll be like, "Yeah, you rejected my call 3 times. Who's Brad?" No. I was on a live.
Oh, don't tell them that.
Okay, take care, Brad. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.